Hello everyone and welcome to this stream during Steam Next Fest. The festival is at full swing and there's a lot of demos you can try out right now on Steam. Among them, a real hidden gem, Infection Free Zone. I'm here with Chief Designer of Infection Free Zone, Bartek.
Hi.
And we're going to talk a little bit about the game, about what you can expect, and of course, remember to try out the demo.
A number of violent attacks is growing rapidly.
Ready for action. This house is infected. We need to build defenses. Construction complete.
Need backup! Need backup!
Another horde incoming! Drag them down! There's too many of them!
Man down! Man down!
Requesting support! To all survivors, broadcasting on all emergency frequencies. We provide food and shelter, safety and security. This is an infection-free zone. Join us.
Bartek, where did the idea come from? What was your first inspiration to make Infection Free Zone?
Okay, so that is actually a long story because
We've got time.
We had a whole history of development based on the real maps throughout history of the studio. So we started with some mobile games that utilized the idea of using real maps. Then we had 911 Operator, that was a great success, and that already had real maps and was a PC game. Then there was a sequel called 112 Operator. And then in the meantime we thought, hey, we need something that can get into more details, into the street level gameplay. And by the way, we are fans of the post-apocalyptic worlds, for post-apocalyptic movies. So we came up with our own ideas for a setting and for a gameplay, and here we are. With Infection Free Zone reaching the demo festival and the early alpha version that some of you might already play.
So you mentioned the setting. What's the setting of the game? So you have to tell us more about that.
Yes, so the setting is inspired by a few sources. The most related would be the I Am Legend book.
Yeah.
The old one, and then the movie is also very similar. So we have a war, a global pandemic that infects people, but does not kill them. They become mad. They become kind of crazy and very violent. We actually prefer to use the word vampires than zombies. Because
Just like in I Am Legend.
Those guys are not dead. They are just more animal-like.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the setting, and we came up with an idea. Hey, we want people to feel their own region where they live. So we wanted to let them stay in the place where they are. So the story tells us about underground shelters where the people hid for a few years, and once their resources depleted, they could come out and rebuild the city. So they have to first find the resources, rebuild the city, and then fight the infection or the infected themselves during the night because they hate the sun.
Okay, so we already know that we don't use the word zombies here, but what is the main difference between an infected and a zombie? You mentioned the day and night cycle. You mentioned that they don't die. What else? What in terms of gameplay? What does this mean for the player?
First of all, we want them to be really challenging, and they are. Actually, they are stronger and faster than a human being. They run faster. They bite. They scratch. They don't infect straight away. I don't want to go into details because that's a part of the story as well. Why they don't infect or they infect our survivors, and well, they don't like the light. They prefer to live in the shadows. They prefer to live underground in some sewers, in some subway, or some just basements of the building. So they hide during the day, and they once the sun goes down, they go out and attack your settlement. Then you're gonna find some infected animals because let's say the virus mutated and could also infect some larger animals or some dogs or some birds. But that's not all. We are going to also encounter some people as usual, and they might be even a higher threat than the infected.
Okay, so in this lore, all of the Earth has this pandemic, and some years have passed, which is actually quite important with what you said at the beginning, that you have experience on real-world maps. And from what I know, you can play the game anywhere on the globe. Is that right?
Yes, that's the main aspect of the game, the main unique selling point, that you can actually select any region that you like. Most likely the place of your origin, because as we noticed, like 90% of the people will choose their own home as their headquarters, and this is actually possible. So you just type in the name of the city, download the map, and then select which building you want your HQ to be in, and that's the start of the game. Okay. That's the very beginning of your construction, of your exploration of the nearby area. I'm sure you will be familiar with what's nearby, what kind of shops, what kind of schools can be.
For example, I would start in my parents' hometown, and there's a hospital 2 blocks away.
Yes, so that's an important point of interest to explore. We actually have a list of like 100 of different points of interest, real life types of locations that you can scavenge. So starting with shops, groceries that perhaps you will find some food, then some hospitals, pharmacies that you can find drugs, then police stations, weapon shops that you can find weapons. Then there are places that you can find vehicles, cars, perhaps some more sophisticated vehicles or tools actually. Then there are places that we can find seeds for farming, some extra tools, and so on. The list is quite long, as we have over 20 resources now. Another important one is that actually the research points are kind of a resource. You have to find places where you can obtain knowledge, like, would you know how to build a radio?
Probably not.
I guess not. Whether you usually know how to turn it on, but how to build an antenna, well, we need some specific technical knowledge.
Yeah, I just know it's about waves, but I don't know anything else.
That's right, and some electricity.
And some electricity, yeah.
Yeah, so this is the point. Like our survivors have to scavenge the knowledge, like looking for some libraries, schools, universities.
Okay.
Yeah, and that's not all. There will be still some extra events and some randomized content that can happen basically anywhere.
Okay, so I've chosen the location I want to start with, and how does the gameplay start? So let's stick with my parents' house. I'm starting at a house, 2 blocks away there's a hospital. It's a small town in southern Poland.
Yes, at this stage, there is a lot of scripts happening. So we start with the scavenging of nearby buildings. We basically look for food, as this is the primary need of our citizens. Then probably you will want to find some weapons. So now it is up to you where you're gonna look for it. You can just look for every house, every single house, and there are basically thousands of homes, buildings nearby. We don't even notice sometimes that the closest area, and we're talking about 4 square kilometers of an area that we actually have to build a zone, and there are like 5,000 buildings on average. 5,000 buildings, that's a lot. And you can scan every single one of them based on their size, location, height, and the points of interest, so amenities. You can find various resources there. Then you rebuild, you adapt the buildings. This is very important mechanics, very unique mechanic in terms of city builders, that we don't build the buildings. We adapt existing buildings to our new need. We don't build them from scratch.
And how does choosing the location, because this was about buildings and about me building, but the infected are there. And does this also affect the starting location? Does this have any influence?
Yes, that's a huge influence actually. We actually divide the whole world in few various types of maps. So let's start with just a complete desolated places. So if there are only trees, no roads and no buildings, you basically should not play those regions. The game will just prompt you to tell that this is not the correct place to choose. You cannot start in the middle of a forest.
But you can try.
You can try, but there won't be any buildings to scavenge, any buildings to adapt, so that's a problem. Then you have small villages and small towns that are basically perfect for gameplay. And we optimize the gameplay for those regions. So as long as there are like 100 up to 1,000 buildings, that's perfect. That's usually spread out, small buildings that are easy to scavenge, easy to adapt, easy to find a place that you might want to surround with walls and defend later on. Then there are the big cities, the downtowns of let's say Manhattan, New York. And this will be too dense location, too many high buildings, there will be too many infected. The cost of adapting the buildings would be too high, the scavenging too long. So we actually disencourage people to try those locations. But they will be playable. It will be just very hard.
Ultra hard mode.
Yes, so you will be again prompted to say, are you sure you want to play this location? This will be a very hard location.
From what I see players doing with other games all over the world, there will be some people who will try that definitely, and you might be surprised.
Of course, I'm sure that those will be the most dedicated players that will play those regions and will prove us that the difficulty level is still too low.
If there's a real apocalypse happening, you have to know such person just in case.
Well, then you're talking about the preppers.
Okay.
And this is also a thing in the game that you can always meet them if you know where to look.
Okay.
But let's not go into this subject. Coming back to the large cities, actually, if you're well aware of all the game mechanics, well, the big cities might be a good place to start if you know where to scavenge, what to scavenge, how to manage your squads, so they actually bring you something interesting.
Okay, that's great. And if you were to tell us more again about the gameplay, but like the genre of the game, because it's survival, it's city building, but it's also RTS because the combat is real time, right?
Yes, so most of the times we call it a city builder, or to be more exact, city rebuilder. Okay, the cities are already there. What we have to do is adapt the buildings back to their to something useful. So this is one thing that usually happens during the day, but during the night it's mostly a base defense, or some might call it a tower defense game. So it's a mix of two genres, and then on top of that we have those real maps that put you in a very certain place that you know.
Okay, and you mentioned that the area, your zone is 4 square miles, And how long is the gameplay? Is it open-ended? Is there any goals to achieve and the game ends? Or is it just a playful sandbox for you to test your survival skills in?
The default mode is the story mode. So you actually follow a story of those people that you take care of. And all the encounters that they're gonna have. There are few various groups that you're gonna meet that they will have their own dilemmas. One very important mechanics that have roots in our previous games are the calls. Once you build a large antenna, you can both transmit and receive transmissions from outside, from distant locations also. And there will be various people calling you. Some crazy people were few years after the apocalypse. So, normal is or crazy is a new normal. And they're gonna have some offers for you. They're gonna have some threats for you. Perhaps they will just want to talk, or they will have some quest for you to accomplish. And this is the basic mode. So you follow this story. You go deeper and deeper into the rabbit hole. You can find out what caused the infection, what happened to other survivors. And after a few hours, you will reach a point when the story, is mostly over, but there are still some generic content that can happen, new encounters, and there is no direct end to it.
So there's like an endless mode, and you can try your
Yes,
skills.
so we start with those 4 square kilometers.
Does it expand?
You cannot expand your zone, your primary zone, outside of it, but you can send your squads to expeditions,
Okay.
and they can go pretty far away, like up to 50 kilometers away, as long as you have fuel and you have radio range. So that depends on the size of the antenna and the technology you
So
reach.
again, it's good to know how to construct the radio.
Yes,
We're going
that's
back
crucial.
to that.
Actually, it happens after about 1 hour of gameplay. That varies from moment to moment, from player to player. But once you build an antenna, you will be able to send, to receive and send transmissions, and then send your squads to expeditions and reach out some more distant points of interest, like for example some military bases, airports, and many other places that that are more distant than.
They're also
those.
based on the real world, or?
Of course, yes. Again, there will be some randomized locations. Everything is basically randomized. This is one of the very difficult challenges about this game, but let's not go into that right now.
Oh, we will.
Of course. So now we have to know where there are the airports, the military bases, some government buildings, some universities, and so. And those are real life locations. Usually we will force the game to spawn an event on those locations.
Most games have design maps or levels. Even if something is randomly generated, there are some rule sets behind this. But you have a third approach. You have real life maps. It's neither designed nor completely random. How do you balance a game like that?
So this is kind of a rocket science in terms of game design, because we never know what the player is going to play on. Like we can predict that how the cities looks like, but actually the cities vary a lot from region to region. Like there are some very dense cities that there are buildings next to buildings. Some that are very loose locations, like single houses on the single road. And we never know what player is gonna choose. We can analyze that, but we don't design maps.
Yeah.
Like we design gameplay. So this is pros and cons. So some people will find it entertaining. Some people might find it boring. And I have to admit that it might be boring because some cities are not really interesting. There are many similar buildings right next to each other, and sometimes people might find out that their home location is not the best location to play. And I have to admit that this is one of the issues that players gonna meet. That maybe they want to play in different locations. Perhaps they wanna share the best locations to play, like a very desolate location that are good for defense, or some locations that are very good for scavenging. That there are many locations that they can look for resources. Or many different aspects, like sometimes a single tower in the middle of a town, like a skyscraper, can be a good location to put a squad there, because they will have a bonus in view range, so they will see more. And there are many more of those, like we don't know where the river is gonna be, and the rivers are a natural obstacle. The infected can swim, so they won't you cannot find a location that is perfectly safe. But again, they of course they go slower. This goes both ways. Your squads don't swim very well, at least they don't scavenge or bring the resources very well through the water. So you have to choose a location that is desolate, but not so much desolate that there are no bridges. So for example, a small island is not even directly playable, because you cannot go away from that region. You will soon run out of places to scavenge. You will run out of resources. Like one of the most important resources are wood and bricks. And most of the time you just get wood from cutting down trees or deconstructing buildings, because we both adapt buildings and we deconstruct the buildings to acquire bricks and acquire wood. That depends on the location, because American cities or towns there are many houses built from wood, while in Europe most of the buildings are built from bricks. And we actually will differ those two and provide different resources. And then if you have wood, you build palisades. If you have bricks, you build walls that are a bit more hard and sturdy and durable. And they durable. Then they provide some better protection. Then there is metal that you basically collect either from just wreckages of cars or some street lamps, or also by deconstructing the buildings. We don't build mines. This is not the times where we can afford to build deep mines for coal or for metal, for steel. So we focus on scavenging. But coming back to your question, we don't design maps. We don't know what people gonna play. We have to operate from behind the curtain, not knowing what the player is gonna play like, because we have hundreds of thousands of locations that people can play. We know that from our previous games, from 911 and 112 Operator, that there were 100,000 different cities that people downloaded and played. And right now there will be even more, because in those games people only played cities, and now we can play towns, small villages, and some rural areas. But on the other hand, we have those recommended locations. There will be 10 locations that are recommended for players.
Okay.
And those will be optimized for the best experience. We make sure that those they are interesting locations, that the architecture is different from each other. Those are locations from various countries. So there are a few from United States. There is at least one from Germany, France, UK, from China. There will be one from Poland, I guess, and the rest are undecided yet. Perhaps maybe our viewers would like to propose something. You can do it in the chat right now.
I mean, the demo is here for started on Monday. You could download the demo, so I think there will be many recommendations for you after people played.
I guess you already played that, so so leave the recommendations. Right now the demo provides only 4 recommended locations. We didn't allow to download any location in the demo. This one is disabled because of the server infrastructure, and basically that this is still work in progress, and you would encounter too many errors.
Okay.
And this is another subject that we have to address now, that there are so many different kind of problems that we can encounter with those any locations that can be played, that we have to be careful about what we give out, because in many cases you will encounter locations that you would encounter locations, for example, that are unreachable because the buildings are so close that the squads cannot get there. They are basically wrongly mapped regions, that someone placed a gigantic building that does not exist because it's underground, but there are errors in maps, and that we cannot verify if it's a real error or not, or somebody just entered a wrong building into the maps. And we have to be careful about those, what kind of maps people download or what maps are provided by OpenStreetMaps, which is an open database.
Yes.
Everyone can go to OpenStreetMaps database and edit their locations. Please don't do that, because actually we have our own copy of that data, and editing OpenStreetMaps won't change the maps in the game. And this is by purpose, because we don't want people to mess OpenStreetMaps data for their gaming purposes.
Yes.
And for that we're gonna have a map editor included in the game, so you can edit the maps on your own inside of the game. So modify the buildings, add the data that is unavailable, or just the data that is missing. Okay. And then there is one the biggest issue about working with real maps, that some regions are basically unmapped. There are very few regions like that, at least in Eastern Europe, basically none in Western Europe.
Mm-hmm.
There are a few locations that we noticed in Canada or in Australia, and there will be also some other sources of data that will help us with some Asian regions like Hong Kong, China, because those have very specific architecture, very tall buildings, very narrow buildings also, and a lot of missing data. We are still working on it, and this is why we couldn't provide any region to the wider audience. So please stay tuned for the early access release, when we will allow to play any region. But still, please keep in mind that there might be errors, that we are still working on every single issue, and we are gonna work on that for many months.
Yeah,
at
and
least a year in early access, until we can tell that, hey, you can download any maps, including any mountain location, because actually terrain elevation is also a thing that we are working on now.
Okay.
There are aspects of all the rivers, all the water areas. There are aspects of electricity. There are aspects of undergrounds, like tunnels, like subway, that we at least want to address.
Mm-hmm.
Because those underground areas won't be available, but they will have some influence on the gameplay.
Okay. And of course, the community, when the game is out, will probably have something to say and help you, because you have a whole world to playtest, which is impossible.
Oh, yes.
So fingers crossed. But you said that in the demo we have 4 locations right now. But from playing the game, is there your favorite location? Like a personal question.
Well, I act just like any player would do, so I download my hometown, from my very hometown of Radom, Poland. That is apparently very well mapped, and I can choose my very home house. Choose my very home as a starting location, and then spread. And I know every single neighborhood, house, who lives there, what he did. And this is the level of immersion that we provide and everyone experiences. So he basically chose this building, and he knows where to look for things. Okay, you can see the street names, you can see the buildings. You can see what their purpose was. Perhaps you want to play with that. Perhaps you want to get yourself into another level of immersion. Like being in this post-apocalyptic world yourself, with the very location that you live and you know.
So you have a whole world at your disposal, and there's a lot of encounters, things to do in the game. So how's the replayability of the game?
Yeah, well, we talked about the story previously, so that you experience a story from this perspective of those people that came out from a shelter, and they explore the surrounding. They explore who survived. They meet other survivors. They transmit or receive transmission. They explore further and further away. So once you reach a certain point in this story, you will be able to start from scratch. Let's say send new settlers that will start another infection-free zone, basically. So and this is a different kind of starting the game. You choose another location. Once again, you start from scratch from very single location, a very limited number of people, and you rebuild the town again. You fight the infected and reach a certain point where perhaps you want to move further and further away. So we don't only rebuild a single city, we rebuild an entire civilization, let's say. Those will be separate gameplays, so you do not connect with this your place of origin. And you're not even forced to choose a nearby location. You can choose any place in the world again. So perhaps you players will recommend the regions for in between each other, recommending what is a good place to defend, what is a good place to scavenge, what is a good place to for spotting, what is a good place for research. And then try a few different maps and how you're gonna live and build there.
So for people who are about to start the demo after our stream right now, any tips for new players who launch the game for the first time?
There is a few things that might be untypical for the games like this. We try that we want to make sure that everyone who play other city builders find themselves around, but there is one distinctive thing about this game, that there is a city builder, some pretty classic city builder stuff, building, constructing, bringing resources, but there are also squads. Those are two separate things that we actually divide all our citizens into those two groups, so workers and squad members. Because the squads are the fighting groups, the groups of 4 people that you can manage directly. We actually say that they have a radio, you can contact them directly, while the workers don't. They have to come back and be given some orders by the citizens manager. You don't control them directly. In this case, they have their work shifts, they go and back and forth. But the squads have to be managed by the player himself. He can give them some order cues, tell them to fight a certain group or scavenge a certain building. Those guys can also jump into some vehicles once they find them and make them work again, because after those years, after the apocalypse, all the cars without maintenance are not so drivable straight away. So they have to, repair the wheels, make sure that there's fuel, and that they can start this vehicle. But once they do, so this is a huge advantage once they find this vehicle, because they can travel faster, they can bring more resources, and they can run over the infected if you micromanage them carefully and tell them how they should do it. But there are consequences to that. The vehicles should only drive by roads, and this is important. They cannot go off-road, they will be much slower, and they need fuel. Once you run out of fuel, you basically have to push the car, so it moves very slowly, even slower than a walking squad. But usually it's a huge advantage, and once you have those vehicles, you can also go much more efficiently on those expeditions further away from the zone. And this is pretty unique, that once you find those vehicles, you can use them and you can fight with them, fight using the vehicles, and run over the infected. But well, coming back to your question, what tips are there? So make sure you know how to navigate the squads. Just right click on this, left click on the squad, and then right click to tell them where to go. And apart from that, they will know what to do. Once they scavenge a building, they will bring the resources back. But sometimes, if their inventory is not full, they will prefer to stay in the building, because fighting from the building is also a huge advantage. Like, they basically shoot from the windows.
Yeah.
All the incoming infected. So this is a huge boost to their defense. Because, well, then if you happen to find some infected in a house, and there is like 1% chance of you finding an infected once you scavenge. But once you do, they will be in huge trouble, and you will have just a few seconds to react and decide if they should keep fighting or evacuate.
Okay.
Yeah, so those squad management and workers management is an important factor, an important aspect of the game, and people have sometimes some difficulties finding their way around, managing both the squads and the
How many
workers.
people do you manage in the game? We mentioned the size of the game, but how large can your
By default,
base
we start with 40 people, and you can make up to 5 squads of 4 people, and then there is a squad limit. Let's say we tell that this is how many radius you have, and how many people you can manage. We actually experimented with putting all the people in the squads and managing them manually, but also by as designed, the squads don't construct. They don't do labor in the buildings. They don't produce. They just go scavenge and fight. So they have professionalizations.
and the workers? And how many workers can you have?
All the rest are the workers.
Okay.
All the rest, guys. Because there's a single resource of people that you have to choose. But then there's a limitation about the weapons. At least in European cities, the weapons are not so easily obtainable. So this will be rather a limit. So how many weapons you have? Because if you don't have enough weapons, you will have to use just blunt melee weapons, so machetes. And this is efficient, but not so much. Like a squad of 4 people maybe can defeat a group of 10 infected, and this will be good. By default, as designed, those infected are supposed to be very dangerous, faster than human, and more aggressive than human. So you start with 40 people, then there will be people joining your zone once you invite them or once you encounter them with your squads. Well, usually you will want to accept them to your group, but you have to be careful about the moods and about the resources if you can feed them. Because if you cannot feed them, all of them will be disencouraged, and this will be actually a disadvantage to you. So we want the zones to grow as large as like 500 people, maybe even 1,000 people. But it's not so large. The cities that we live in are like
I know, but like after the apocalypse, you know.
So those few hundreds people should be the limit. And actually, once you reach that, you will encounter some extra problems with the moods and how the people feel. So this will be a kind of a limit. You won't be able to grow larger, but you can always start from scratch and send people away to build a new zone. Yeah,
like a settlement expedition.
So this is a kind of a continuation of gameplay and starting anew.
And what's next? What are the future holds? What are the next steps ahead of the team? And what can players expect from you?
So where are we? So right now it's a pre-alpha. Well, it's quite extended pre-alpha. It's already playable and then presentable. There are many people that received early access, all the Kickstarters and extra backers. and many YouTubers that receive the access. Let's call them alpha testers that are already checking the basic features of the game. So we are already at the stage where you can build the zone, build the walls, received a few different transmissions where you can manage the squads and construct and adapt. There are a number of features that are under development at this very moment, so that's partial adaptation. This is actually important because we adapt the buildings from like 100 square meters up to tens of thousands square or cubic meters, because well the height also matters. And now we implemented the partial adaptation. You can select how much of this building you want to adapt. Previously it was impossible. We selected a whole building or not. So this is under development. Then the exchange system is under development, so squads can exchange their inventory without going back to the HQ, or they can just change the inventory or drop things. Then the expedition system, the large system that allows you to travel further and further away, is also under development right now. There is a huge aspect that was already prototyped, that's terrain elevation. So all the walls, all the towers, all the mountains, hills, and then rivers and sea level is also under development. But we already have the weather system. That is a huge aspect. Again, you might not notice this, not so obvious, but the infected hate the sun, not the day. So if there is a lot of clouds, they go out during the day also if it's cloudy enough. So sometimes you might be attacked during the day as well. And you can also be attacked by other groups of survivors. We call them rebels or bandits. And this is even bigger threat because they have guns, they have arms. Sometimes they also have vehicles. Well, some of those groups will also help you or trade with you, and this is another aspect that is still under development. So at this stage we are at like 10 calls implemented in the game. We want to have like 30 or 50 transmissions, and there are like 100 of events that can happen. What you encounter, what you find, what kind of quests you're gonna have, and objectives that you have to complete.
Okay, we have some questions from the community I'd like to ask you. You mentioned how important other players are when they can give you tips where to start the game, but do you plan on any multiplayer mode?
I would love to, but this is out of consideration now. There won't be any multiplayer any kind, so all we can do is compete and tell ourselves how far did we reach on this single location.
And you also said about I Am Legend as an inspiration, but our community wants to know what games inspired Infection Free Zone.
Yeah, so we first of all look at other city builders, and the biggest one are the most important. So starting with there are Billions, then there is Frostpunk, there is Banished. Also there is a game called Timberborn. That is a really nice city builder with a lot of crafting and terrain modification. We still look what's popular. Well, Manor Lords was recently a huge inspiration. There was a demo at the previous festival that we also take a close look how they solve things. But still, Infection Free Zone is much different than that. Starting with those any real maps playable with the squad management or just the vehicles themselves that are also very unpopular aspect of this kind of games.
Another question we got, so we've got the experience with 911 Operator. Are these games anyway connected?
Apparently yes, like it's not obvious how they're connected. Actually it's more of an Easter egg that we already spoiled because who played 112 Operator and played the last DLC that is called The Last Duty, it's actually about a start of a pandemic, of a kind of where the infection starts and there are people attacked by the infected, basically beaten down and killed. And you play until the whole world fails, and you fail. You have to fail. And then we have this intro to Infection Free Zone that says that people hid underground and stayed in shelters until the things go quiet outside. And actually they are connected. Like some of you might notice that the main voice actor is the same. That's Ian. Our close and very important part of the team that plays the same role. So there is a bit of a backstory for him, that he is qualified to be the operator and to actually manage the squads and manage the zone. So this is this kind of lore that we have about our zone. But to be honest, we have to adapt the game and the story to every single location in the entire world. So we tried this story to be kind of generic, not go into many details that are specific for any culture on the world. So we tried this to make an universal story that could happen anywhere in the world, and you can feel that yes, it is possible in my location.
Okay, I'm watching the gameplay right now, and could you tell us what's happening right now on the screen?
So this is actually something that we call swarm attack. So there's a large number of infected hordes that are attacking the zone. This happens once every few days. I won't tell when exactly, but it starts with a loud howl by the infected, and they attack you with more violence than usual. So if you survive this, this will be an achievement. You have to prepare for this because this will happen. Once you send the squads to expeditions, they can actually find the swarms gathering, and you can know with a few days advantage that they will come, and to allow yourself to prepare. But once they do and you're unprepared, they will overwhelm you surely.
Okay.
Maybe you can notice that there are also some infected dogs around. This is not the only type of infected. Sometimes there might be other animals, like bears or moose, or a few others. That there will be infected bears as well, but those have usually they don't mix. Usually they attack on separate times, on separate occasions. And they all are a different challenge. Like the birds, cannot be killed with melee weapons. They are too fast. They run away, and they mostly attack your farms. The bears basically cannot be run by vehicles. They are too big. The vehicle will be damaged if you do so, and they're basically a tank that's you're gonna need a lot of ammo. But they are slow. They are infected humans. They are bandits. They are not infected, and there is one special type of infected that will be revealed later on.
A surprise. Let's
say it's surprise. It's not a typical tank or anything like it. It's more of a let's say one specific mutation that provides a special challenge.
Okay, and the last question from the community: can you cure the infected?
Oh, that's a difficult question. Actually, I would prefer not to answer that because, I don't want to spoil the story. But coming back to the first question, like why infected, not the zombies? They are not zombies. Those are not dead people. They are not rotting. Those are just, let's say, like dogs with rabies virus. So they're just crazy, mad. They hate sun. But yeah, I think it would be possible to cure them.
So thank you very much for listening, and be sure to check out Infection Free Zone. The demo is available right now on Steam Next Fest, and have a blast. Bye.
See ya.